This story took place during the years of the Great Patriotic War. It was recounted by a woman who lived through the German occupation of their city at that time. Back then, there was a young girl named Elizabeth, whom they affectionately called Liz. She was just 8 years old, but those times are etched in her memory as if they happened yesterday. Liz lived with her mom, grandmother, and younger brother while her dad and grandfather were away at the front lines. They were waiting for another sibling to join their family. Even though she was young, Liz did her best to help her mom and grandmother during those tough years. When the Germans took over their town, they couldn't escape and had to stay put. Elizabeth pitched in by working at a factory to help her family. The times were harsh, with food shortages, and they often worked in exchange for meals. Her older grandmother cared for her younger brother, while Liz, despite her age, also contributed to the family's well-being. Life took a dark turn when the Germans occupied their town. Liz and her friends were curious kids, and one day stumbled upon unfamiliar small metal structures that the Germans probably set up. They decided to investigate, wondering if there was food or clothing inside. Waiting until nightfall, the children cautiously approached the structures, which were surrounded by barbed wire and guarded by German soldiers. After the guards moved away, the kids found an opening and sneaked onto the premises. The air was heavy with a foul smell, and they could hear moans. The children suspected that these might be prisoners, but their curiosity pushed them forward. As night fell, 2 of Liz's friends got scared and went home, leaving Liz and her friend Marcia behind. The girls waited in anticipation for the darkness to deepen before entering one of the structures. The locks were complex, like bolts, and as the surroundings grew darker and more foreboding, Liz and Marcia were the only ones left on this risky adventure. Eventually, the girls grew tired and unknowingly fell asleep. When they woke up, they were in a grim situation. They found themselves in a cage, surrounded by a disturbing scene of bodies, filth, and a nauseating odor. Nearby, in other cages, were a young man and a woman, both around 20 years old. The girls cried and pleaded for help, but the young man warned them to be quiet, fearing the arrival of someone ominous referred to as he. The young man went on to explain that the Germans were conducting horrifying experiments on prisoners, healthy young women and children. They aimed to create super soldiers through starvation, torture, beatings, mutilation, and even brain implants. Those subjected to these horrors either lost their sanity or died. Those who survived became like soulless machines, devoid of emotion and pain, ready to carry out any orders. Fear gripped the girls as they heard this terrifying account, and then he appeared. Describing him as human would be a stretch. He was a ghastly sight, wearing tattered clothes covered in blood with wild and deranged eyes. He moved with purpose, walking towards the girls. However, the young man bravely tried to distract him by yelling and throwing a stick. This only redirected his attention towards the young man, who was pulled out of the cage and subjected to unimaginable brutality. Seizing the moment, the girls managed to slip through a small window and escape. They heard the agonizing cries of the young man as he inflicted unspeakable horrors upon him. Miraculously, the girls found themselves back home, where their worried parents had been searching for them all night. The girls shared their haunting experience, but what could the women and elderly do in response? Following this traumatic incident, the girls vowed never to venture into the woods again. When their forces finally liberated the town from the Germans, they discovered the gruesome aftermath: bodies torn apart and dismembered, young and old victims subjected to unspeakable atrocities. The area was eventually cleansed, the victims laid to rest, and a monument was erected in their memory, standing as a testament to the horrors of fascism. A strange incident unfolded at our school that left everyone baffled. In the 7th grade, we had a physics teacher named Mr. Anderson. He was a beloved teacher, known for his sense of humor and popularity among students. He had a friendly demeanor, often cracking jokes during class and earning the respect of all the kids. The unusual events began on a crisp autumn day, right after lunch. When the bell rang, signaling the end of the break, we all filed back into the classroom and took our seats. However, on this day, our physics teacher was conspicuously absent. Mr. Anderson, who was usually there ahead of time, was nowhere to be seen. With only 15 minutes remaining in the class, Mr. Anderson burst into the room in a rush. He slammed the door behind him, his usual warmth replaced by a distant expression as he settled down at his desk. In a matter-of-fact tone, he informed us that our notebooks, which he had collected for correction the previous day, had gone missing. He explained that he couldn't locate them and that we would need to acquire new notebooks and redo the assignment. A collective sigh of disappointment filled the room, but then something unexpected happened. Mr. Anderson slammed his fist on the desk, his voice commanding us to be silent. His eyes blazed with anger, a stark contrast to his usual composed demeanor, leaving us all stunned into silence. Following that unsettling episode, a noticeable change overcame Mr. Anderson. His friendly and easygoing nature seemed to evaporate, replaced by an uncharacteristic demeanor of irritability and annoyance. His patience wore thin, and he began snapping at us over minor matters. This transformation extended beyond interactions with students. It affected his interactions with colleagues as well. He withdrew from socializing with other teachers and, when forced to engage, his conversations were strictly business-oriented. Curiosity and speculation buzzed throughout the school as everyone tried to fathom the reason behind Mr. Anderson's sudden change. With no apparent personal problems or financial woes, the enigma persisted. Then in December, a puzzling incident involving one of our classmates occurred. A student named Emily stayed behind after school for a physics project meeting with Mr. Anderson. As we waited outside, an alarming sight unfolded before us. Two teachers carried Emily's limp form toward the medical office, and Mr. Anderson trailed behind them. When Emily regained consciousness, we eagerly questioned her about what had transpired. However, she drew a blank, remembering nothing after entering the classroom. Mr. Anderson's explanation was that she had fainted and rolled into the corridor. Although the other teachers accepted his account, doubts lingered among us. Oddly enough, Emily's hair underwent an uncanny change after the incident, gradually turning gray over the following weeks. Every encounter with Mr. Anderson induced physical reactions in Emily, such as cold sweats and trembling, until her hair was completely white by the time Christmas break arrived. The culmination of this perplexing saga arrived in mid-January, when an unexpected presence descended upon our school: the police. Behind the school, on the edge of the football field, a grim discovery emerged from the dense forest: a decomposed body. Cloaked in the shroud of decay, the remains were barely recognizable as human, reduced to skeletal fragments. Nearby, a bag lay partially obscured in the tall grass, containing a collection of physics notebooks, the missing notebooks belonging to our class. Subsequent investigations revealed the chilling truth. The lifeless body belonged to Mr. Anderson. The cause of death was determined to be a broken neck. And then came the biggest mystery of all. Mr. Anderson, who had taught us for so long, seemed to vanish without a trace. Following the police visit, he was expected to teach more classes that day, but he never appeared. He became an enigma, disappearing from our lives as suddenly as he had entered them, leaving us with a haunting tale that would be etched in our memories forever. It was a prom night. Fun, joy, and a sea of emotions, as is usually the case, but every celebration comes to an end. And so one student proposed an idea. Let's each write down on a sheet of paper who we want to become in the future. We'll put all the sheets in a box and seal it, and then at the alumni reunion, 5 years from now, we'll open it and see whose dreams came true and whose didn't. And we'll have a fun evening reminiscing about our prom. And that's exactly what they did. Someone wrote that they want to become a businessman, while others wrote a hairdresser, and soon everyone forgot about it. And then, 5 years later, the long-awaited alumni reunion took place. Everyone came to see their old friends except for one, beloved Eugene. Everyone knew the reason. He became a bodyguard and while performing his duty was killed. Soon when the box was opened and everyone retrieved their papers, only one remained at the bottom of the box, and it belonged to Eugene. Everyone was very curious about what was written on it, as on that prom night he never told anyone what he had written on the sheet. Opening the paper, everyone read with horror the single yet very sorrowful phrase, "I won't be around anymore."